Okay, so I'm going to quit on that. These are some references if you're interested in some writing, music courses. That particular Appassionata, I think, you can imagine Beethoven sitting down at the piano and basically exchanging with that person by music that, I understand what you're going through, I'm sorry with you, I'm sorrowful. But then working that person through that great loss to something that is something they could deal with, and by going from those lower frequency sounds to higher frequency, minor to major, syncopation, the lightness of the music at the end, and then returning to the original rondo, it just doesn't have the pain or the sorrow or the difficulty, but still not acknowledging it's there. So anyway, I hope this was interesting at least to you of how one person overcome their own medical illnesses, use music to soothe their own soul, and I think points the way that depression and illness is something that could have taken away some of the most amazing music that was ever composed should he have tried to take his own life. So to stay with things, to overcome things, and to be persistent is incredibly important in life. And all you guys are not without difficulties and not without things that make your life more challenging. But I think there's a lot of reward out there, and I think to find the type of music, maybe classical music isn't necessarily your favorite thing, but to use music as some support as well when you're going through difficult times. I'd be happy to take any questions, and thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, sir.
To me, it's just inconceivable that a person who is deaf, alcoholic, syphilis, all these other diseases could compose such incredible music. Do you have any insight how somebody with all those maladies could compose music that's lasted for centuries?
I just go back to country music. The best way to make good music is to have sorrow and pain and suffering and probably a bunch of alcohol.
Okay.
So maybe your happy hours are not such a bad idea.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course, everything not in excess. I agree. It's remarkable. I think that's why I find the contrast between him dealing with his medical illnesses and composing at such a high level for us, really. I mean, he used it to fix himself, and he heard nothing of his Ninth Symphony. It was all in his brain. He imagined composing a whole symphony and not being able to hear a single note. Yes, ma'am.
What got you interested in Beethoven, and were you equally interested in Mozart, for example, and why Beethoven instead of Mozart?
Well, I have a whole talk about Mozart, so if you want me to go talk about Mozart, I'll do it. But don't encourage me. I like Mozart music, but Mozart music is happy, and you've almost got to be happy to listen to it. It's very frivolous. Beethoven is not frivolous. It's very deep, very dark. He's showing you his soul. And that's what I like about it. I liked Beethoven before I went into medicine. I'm always interested in some of the historical aspects of the different famous people, including their medical history. And that's, Bob was talking about it. I like history. I like understanding how modern medicine actually helps us understand. Like, we couldn't have analyzed that hair and understood lead poisoning in him even 50 years ago. We just wouldn't have had the technology. And with a lot of the, what we call molecular philology, we can now look at the types of organisms and the type of infections that some of these people had by looking at bones, DNA in the bones, other things. So I think there's a lot more that modern medicine can contribute to history and understanding what happened to people in different circumstances than we ever had before. Most of it we had to rely on writing that was done at the same time as his death. Now we can use modern technology to really understand it. So it's liking the music, trying to understand why I feel so much sort of a bond to that music, and then just trying to understand where he was coming from as he was composing. And that's, that's obviously none of us can really get into his head, but there's timelines of when things are composed and what was going on in his life at those particular moments. I have a much longer talk that I didn't subject you to, which really it gets into that aspect. But Mozart is just a much different deal. He really was a genius. But Beethoven's much more of a self-made man or woman, and I like that aspect of it. There are the geniuses in the world, but most of us, just have to work hard and try to do the best with our own capacities and skills and talents, and that's the most heartening to me. The geniuses, I'm just not in that group. So, there's some people that seem to have gotten dropped on Earth from outer space, and Mozart's one of them. Shakespeare's probably another one, illiterate parents. Ramanujan, any mathematicians in here? Ramanujan was from southern India, was completely uneducated. We're still trying to figure out some of his ideas about infinity. If you want to read a great book, it's called The Man Who Knew Infinity. It's about Ramanujan. He went to England, studied with some of the most respected mathematicians in the world, but was from a completely illiterate family. So where that could have come from, who knows? So anyway, those people don't come along very often, but they'll clearly be talking about Mozart in 200 years. They'll be talking about Beethoven in 200 years. So great question. So it's a little bit of self-analysis, I think. Yes, ma'am.
The great comedians are all depressives.
Well, the best comedians are people that are manic depressives, and that's part of the reason that they frequently kill themselves. Manic depression has its ups and its downs, and so I have the feeling that he went through those same phases. He has very productive phases, and then phases where he's doing almost nothing. And this is the sort of timeline I was telling you about. You can see that he's seized with something, and then he's quite dormant for a while. And I'm sure he was going through those cycles. But you're right, the best comedians, they're very spontaneous, they're very fun, but they're frequently their own best, their own worst enemy. That's a good point. Yes, ma'am?
On the other side of the coin, don't a lot of surgeons want music played while they're performing surgery? And how does that help them?
Well, say it again, surgeons want to do what during surgery?
Play music played.
Oh yeah, I don't know if you ever spent any time in the OR where you could actually listen and not be under anesthesia. Actually, Bob probably has had the same experience I have. If you're in the OR with somebody who's playing music that you can't stand, and you have to stand there for 4, 6, 8 hours, whatever, neurosurgery, it's very tough, but they find it very relaxing to have their music. And it may be a song that they replay over and over and over again. It may be a genre like classical music. Sometimes it's rock and roll Van Halen. It's like, you can't imagine doing brain surgery to Van Halen. But it's very annoying. My wife is an anesthesiologist, so she gets to be awake while you're not. And she gets to deal with surgeons, which is not easy, and she gets to hear this music. So it's a good point. But they do frequently. I find that there's certain tasks I can do with music on, and there's certain tasks I cannot do with music on. But other people are, the exact opposite. Yes, ma'am.
So coming from the depression standpoint, do you think the depression was always there with Beethoven and then it got significantly worse once he was diagnosed or once he became deaf? Or do you think the depression was because of all the came on after as a all the stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of like nature versus nurture. You can't have nature without nurture, vice versa. So your genes and your environment are completely interactive. So he had alcoholism in his family. He was treating himself with alcohol very early, which is common with depression. And then it's clearly that the alcohol, the depression, or the bipolar took over. But he had a tremendous amount of ramifications of alcoholic liver disease and pancreatitis. So I don't think anybody will really know the answer. We don't have great, sort of mental health understanding of what was going on with him. In fact, the books where you would write him a question and he would give you the answer, you actually don't have his answer, you just have what the question was. And a lot of those books were actually thrown away after he died. So it's very limited understanding, and he was really a sociopath. He didn't want people around him, he didn't want to be involved. So we don't have great answers to what, it's a great question, and I wish I could understand it better, and I'm sure there's lots of psychiatrists who would like to understand it better. Okay, well.